Hi, friend, and welcome back to Marvelous Friends, your home for all things Marvel Cinematic Universe and beyond. I'm Rhett, and today I'm going to be breaking down the official difference between mutants and Inhumans. Roll that credit. The MCU has a very interesting problem on the horizon here in the next phase and a half, or potentially sooner depending on how quickly they start setting up these potential characters. Now, for roughly the last 10 years, the MCU cannot use any reference to the word or characters involved with mutant, as Fox Entertainment owned the rights to all those characters and terminology, making it even so that the MCU had to tiptoe around terms such as evolution and mutation. And this did pose some interesting problems. However, there was a solution, and so the MCU turned to Inhumans. Though now that the Fox deal is complete and mutants will be making their way to the MCU, there needs to be a very clear definition between what the two parties are. And this is where I could see potential issues rising, as there will be confusion between the two characters and potential other pitfalls for some of those characters as well. Inhumans have had kind of a touchy history when it comes to their relationship with the MCU at large, only really being featured on the silver screen of TV. Now, they, of course, were slated to receive a film that was actually supposed to debut on July 12th, this last Friday, but ultimately that was canceled again to move it to a TV program that only received one season and not the best reviews. And that's where they've been left, at TV, primarily featured on the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. program. Everyone on the big screen having received their powers from one of the other major forms of skill sets. This being either just a skilled fighter such as Hawkeye or Black Widow, being someone who has technology-based powers such as Iron Man, who built his suit. We have, of course, those who are created in the lab through science like Hulk or Captain America. And then we, of course, have aliens or cosmic level powers, this being Thanos or Thor, and finally those who wield magic such as Doctor Strange. Of course, there are other two categories, Inhuman and Mutant, those being anyone who has a predisposition for powers that are born as human on Earth. Now, it's this kind of definition between the two that we'll really have to see focused on moving forward, as we'll have characters now between both of these parties, some kind of major characters that are known. Of course, we have the X-Men that are mutants, and then we have Quake, which is probably our most prominently featured Inhuman within the MCU on the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. program. There is a very interesting issue, though, and that is the fact that we actually have met a couple mutant characters in the MCU already. You can actually see a video that I did on that up in the card where I talk about who I believe actually was our first official mutant in the MCU, but we also have Wanda, aka Scarlet Witch, and Quicksilver, though Quicksilver, much like his powers, had a very short and fast appearance in the MCU. The two of them are traditionally mutants in the comic books. However, their stories were important to the MCU, and they found a way around this, adapting them as creations of the Mind Stone within Loki's scepter and calling them miracles. So this is, of course, why a lot of people are turning to Wanda being the catalyst that's going to result in the mutation process beginning and creating mutants within the MCU. However, that's a theory video all on its own and something I'm definitely planning to get around to at some point. However, this then, of course, like I said, raises the whole issue of how are we going to clearly define the two parties within the MCU moving forward. Mutants are relatively straightforward. A mutant is someone that is human that has a gene sequence that is lying dormant that holds their powers. At some point in their life during natural human development or a moment of great stress, this gene is then triggered, allowing for it to mutate the DNA and for the power to surface. In some of these instances, the sequence triggers a power in response to the situation, and so you'll see someone who is able to regenerate at a time when they are on the deathbed or something like that, though this isn't always the case and the powers are just random. However, this is one crucial fact. They are human down to the DNA, and it's just a mutation that occurs naturally within the DNA sequence. Though, depending on how we get to the fact that the mutations begin, this could be something that's adapted slightly different within the MCU, so again, that's a whole other video. Inhumans, just like mutants, receive their powers through surfacing dormant DNA markers. However, these DNA markers are not naturally occurring in humans like mutants, and that is the crucial difference here. These genetic markers coming from experiments on our ancient ancestors by the Kree. So a long time ago, Kree arrived on our planet and were looking to create an army of living weapons. And so they did experiments on early humans, interjecting their own blood into human blood. This resulted in the surfacing of supernatural powers within these human hosts. However, this experiment was ultimately deemed a failure and they left these humans on Earth and left back into the cosmos. However, these genetic markers did continue on and were passed on from generation to generation, allowing to a large population of potential Inhumans. And this is where another major difference comes in between the two, as Inhumans can't just naturally trigger their own development, and it's a very particular process on how this works. This process is known as teragenesis, where when an Inhuman is exposed to particular crystals that are natural to the Kree environment, which then are later turned into dust and sediment particles, then activates the process. Now, during teragenesis, the Inhuman goes into a rock-like cocoon in the MCU, though the cocoons look a little bit different in the comic books. However, this cocoon process is what allows for the body to transform, much like a kind of caterpillar into a butterfly instance. Now, this process takes different amount of time, and we've seen various lengths in the MCU, as we see some people go into their cocoon and emerge within seconds, and some last for months. However, ultimately emerging when their body's transformation is complete. Now, this months-long transformation is a particular case, and in this instance, we see that the Inhuman claims that it was a slowed-down process on his own will, as he tried to fight the teragenesis itself from within the cocoon, causing it to last much longer than the normal teragenesis. Another major aspect of difference between the two comes from the DNA itself post-transformation. For the most part, DNA of mutants remains human and is the same as it was before the transformation, and this is not the case for Inhumans, as their DNA goes through a massive transformation as well. So during the process of teragenesis, the dormant alien strands of DNA surface and replace large portions of their human DNA. This is allowing for people to test their blood and see these human and alien splicing DNA strands post-transformation. And it's actually through this process in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. that they are able to identify Inhumans and register them. Now, I'm sure that registration aspect is going to become huge in the MCU moving forward. Of course, we know that anyone who is enhanced or superpowered must register through the Sokovia Accords, and this distinction between Inhuman and Mutant is going to become a major part of that, and this potential blood test is going to be a part of that registration process. Now, in the general public's idea, for the most part, kind of, sorta, Inhumans have come to be accepted, but this whole new aspect of mutants being introduced is a whole new thing that I'm sure is going to be causing some serious problems with the general public and a little bit more fear, as they've come to understand that Inhuman is more of a restrained aspect of transportation, but mutation can happen to anyone, potentially causing some mass hysteria, which I think would be a very interesting storyline to include, and I will get into that with regards to how the storyline of Inhuman versus Mutant is going to be treated within those stories. Our last bit of difference that we're going to talk about between the two here for this video comes in the form of the transformation itself. As I just mentioned, the transformation of a mutant is relatively random and can happen to anyone. However, we do know that the public has come to realize that the transformation into an Inhuman is rather a limited one, and is kind of somewhat back under control. Now, initially, this was a very controlled process, as Inhumans had to be selected to go through this teragenesis, and all the Terrigen crystals were under the control of a group of Inhumans in a community called Afterlife, where people went through a very strong selection process to go through the teragenesis process. However, of course, during Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. in roughly 2015, according to the story timeline, those Terrigen crystals did get dropped into the ocean, a large batch of them being then left to dissolve within that ocean, causing a mass outbreak of teragenesis from those who consumed fish oil pills and the fish itself from those infected fish. Though, like I said, this has come under control a little bit through the efforts of S.H.I.E.L.D. cutting back on these random kind of transformations, and has again come to be something that's a little bit more of a controlled process, so that it's not just something that is happening all the time. Now, as I just mentioned shortly before, there's definitely going to be some aspect of registration for these characters, as of course the Sokovia Accords are still a thing within the MCU. Though we'll see how that plays forward moving through in this post-blip world. Now, I hope that this plays a major part in the storyline between Inhumans and Mutants, as of course the MCU and Marvel Studios likes to bring up kind of smaller players in the comics and make them bigger names and develop those characters a lot more. I hope that they make the clear distinctions between Inhuman and Mutant characters. And I think this registration process would be a great way to do that. And plus, I think it would cause some great tension between the two, as we see characters who are Inhuman mistaken for Mutant and vice versa, causing some kind of almost decisive racism or powerism in the MCU, with these characters butting heads against each other and potentially leading to, again, there is a comic book event called X-Men vs. Inhumans, and I think that could be something that we see play out. Ultimately, though, the Avengers kind of stepping in to be the middleman here in adapting both Inhuman and Mutant characters to the Avengers rosters to allow them to kind of be represented in the greater global protection group that are the Avengers. I think this would allow for some great characters. Miss Marvel is a regular member of the Avengers who is an Inhuman, and so I think seeing her adaptation to the MCU would be great. This is something that's actually been discussed. Maylee Kaling has been in discussion with Marvels about adapting a Miss Marvel character to the MCU in some way, so that could potentially be a part of this. I would also personally love to see Quake still move up into the MCU personally. I love the character. I definitely see that Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. unfortunately is kind of probably heading towards their end in the next couple seasons, and I don't want to see the character go away, though I'm sure she is probably tired of playing that character now for so long and we want to do something different. I hope that they can still pull her in to the film aspects as well and have her represent the Inhuman side of things as well. And we know, of course, that there's been plenty of mutants who've served on the Avengers. Wolverine and Storm have served, and tons of others. I'm just blanking on right now. But I think that would be a great way to kind of resolve that conflict between the two while still providing some great moments of storyline, movie potentials, Disney Plus franchises of the X-Men and Inhuman conflict. Hopefully this helped you a little bit kind of understand the difference between the two groups of mutants and Inhumans. I will say one last little kind of final thought on this as well. I really do hope that we see both these groups moving forward in the MCU, and that with now the use of mutants available, we don't see Marvel Studios just phase out Inhumans entirely. Like I mentioned, I definitely do see that Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is kind of coming to an end, and Inhumans play a relatively big part of those character storylines. And so, with the end of that show, we could see them potentially phase out the Inhumans as well and just go with mutants moving forward, which I think would be a detriment to the MCU. I really enjoyed the use of Inhumans. I've enjoyed many of the characters who are Inhuman and like to see their storylines continue on past this point. And I, again, think this whole dynamic of Inhumans versus mutants would be a very interesting thing to explore and a major loss if Marvel decided to go this route. However, I would love to know your thoughts on all of this. Do you like the idea of having both mutants and Inhumans? Would you rather see Inhumans phased out and replaced by mutants? Let me know down in those comments. That is what they're for. If you liked this video and found it helpful, definitely give it a like. I always appreciate it. And make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a thing of my future videos. That's fine. Until then, though, I love you all 3,000, and I hope you have a marvelous rest of your day. Bye, friend!